Good morning, dear students. I'm going to explain you general information about discourse analysis, text grammar, cohesion, coherence, and its types. So, what is text itself? Text is the record of some speakers or writers' discourse, uttered or written in some context and for some purpose. And context, no texts are constructed in isolation. Language is a social practice. So, and meaning is dependent on context, the events and situational factors in which acts of communication are embedded. The subject, the purpose of the circumstances, the physical context, the relationship between addresser and addressee, their previous contact with each other, and the topic is the meaning that is dependent on the context. So, and also language has varieties. There are regional and social varieties and registers also. Register can be divided into field of discourse, subject matter, chemistry, linguistic, musics, and tenor of discourse, sometimes referred to as style, formal and informal, and mode of discourse, medium of the language activity, spoken, written, or Twitter. So language is used in a variety of domains. For example, the interplay of context and domains has brought about the development of recognizable text types. In other words, examples: recipes, news reports, essays, novels, poems, contracts, and prescriptions. And there are regular variations of forms according to register, and genres developed from register used for a particular purpose. So we learn to recognize genres by being exposed to them, the text we have encountered, and have expectations. The way we read a text depends on how many similar texts we have read before and the expectations we have about such text. In other words, you should note down, when learning a language, you should try to be exposed to as many texts and different text types as possible. So, text as interaction. Most texts have distinctive features which are typical and act as signals of the language, variety, or genre that they belong to. We interact with the text using these signals to construct meaning from it. So, there is one exception. You need to actively ask yourself when a text is and what features you can identify and make hypotheses about your expectations. You cannot understand a text by being passive. Spoken with written mode. Some features of spoken language, they are fillers, are just repetition, discourse structure, just the opening structure of your sentence or of your speech, double subject. For example, my friend and he, repetition, a friend, my best friend, and hesitations. So language variation, register. Here you can see the modes of the register: mode, domain, tenor, taking for granted or making explicit. In informal situations, we don't need to make everything explicit. We can take things for granted in formal situations when it's important to avoid ambiguity or when participants do not want to presume a relationship that's not established. Things will be made very explicit. Often the distinction is not so much between written and spoken, but rather between whether a text is produced in a context-dependent situation and whether it's planned or unplanned. So here you can see unplanned and planned text, context-independent and context-independent. Can you place this text on the continuum if you can this kind of exercise? Beyond the sentence, also sentences can occur on their own. They usually form texts. There are three prerequisites for a text. A text makes sense. The first one, it's somehow complete. The second one, and the third one, and it has coherence and cohesion. So when is a text not a text? we can tell whether something is a text. For example, look at the first text. Pick up a handful of soil in your garden, ordinary unexciting earth, yet it is one of nature's miracles and one of her most complex products. Your success as a gardener will largely depend on its conditions, so take the first step in gardening, get to know your soil. So it makes sense when the text makes sense when we can understand what the text is about, when we can translate it, when we can paraphrase it, and when we can summarize it, and the last one, when we can explain the meaning to someone else. At this time, the text can make sense. And it's somehow complete. It's made of sentences, not bits of sentence. Can I have a? It's not a complete sentence. We know there is something missing at the end. We're not very clear. It's not a complete text. We know there is something missing at the beginning. Our text was taken from the first page of a book about gardening. The first paragraph introduced the idea of the important role played by the soil, underlining how unremarkable it is in physical terms, but how miraculous it is in terms of properties, and encouraged the reader to become familiar with this element. So what is cohesion? Cohesion and coherence are the main features of the text that can make text. Cohesion is the set of grammatical and lexical connections between sentences which are linked together into a text. There are several of these elements in our text. For example, pick up soil in your garden, unexciting earth, yet it's one of the features, and one of her, your success, gardener. Coherence, fertilizers put back what the rain and plants take away. Plastic pots are not just substitutes for clay ones. Pears are little more temperamental than apples. Supporting and training are not quite the same thing. Incoherent, although there are some cohesive features in the text, it's not coherent. It doesn't really say anything coherent that one could paraphrase. It seems to be talking about a lot of unconnected things, even though it is on the topic of gardening. In fact, it's taken from the first line of each chapter of the gardening manual. Cohesive features, what are they? Texts have texture, as we have seen. The sentences in a text are linked together into a cohesive whole. The elements are in some way tied together. They are linked by a series of devices known as cohesive ties. Without cohesive ties, texts become a collection of isolated sentences. For example, they are the devices a language uses to achieve unity and cohesiveness in text, written or spoken. 5 kinds of cohesion have been identified. They are reference, substitution, ellipsis, and conjunction, which are kinds of grammatical cohesion using closed set. Besides, the lexical cohesion, which uses the resources of the lexical system by using the same, similar, or related words in order to refer back to and link up with the previous occurrence. Lexical cohesion, which uses the resources of the lexical system. The 2 broad types of lexical cohesion are reiteration, 4 kinds of repetition, synonymy, superordinates, general words, and collocations, which refers to the habitual company which words keep. Cohesion resulting from the occurrence of words collocates. Grammatical cohesion. Reference is a semantic relation. First one of them is reference. So reference is a semantic relation. It ensures the continuity of a meaning in a text involving items which cannot be interpreted without a reference to the surrounding text. It is endophoric reference, or outside the text situation it's considered to be exophoric reference, and a reference to elements which can be reconstructed from inside the text, and it can be cataphoric, or much more commonly anaphoric, pointing backwards. I met John in the station. He was completely drunk. So where he in the second sentence refers back to John. In the first sentence, only endophoric reference is cohesive since it refers to another point in the text. In the majority of cases, it is anaphoric. Reference, there are three kinds of reference. They are personal, demonstrative, and comparative. To be able to understand, produce, and analyze text, you will need to know how to recognize them. So usage of the personal pronouns, possessive pronouns, and possessive identifiers. Most pronouns replace noun phrases so as to be economical and avoid excessive repetition. And the second one, sometimes the third person pronoun it can refer back to not to a noun or noun phrase but to a large unit, sometimes even more than one sentence. Third person pronouns are nearly always endophoric, but first and second person pronouns can be exophoric. Demonstrative reference involves the demonstrative pronouns, demonstrative articles, and demonstrative adverbs. They are a form of verbal pointing. They can also be used to refer to extended texts. These can refer to something the speaker has said just before and that something the other person has said. The former and the latter discriminate between entities mentioned one before the other in an early part of the text. Comparative reference may be general, expressing the identity, similarity, or difference between things, or particular, expressing qualitative or quantitative comparison. They are such, so the same as the other. They are comparative references. So substitution. What is substitution itself? Substitution is a grammatical relation where one linguistic grammatical item substitutes for a lexical one. The substituted item can only be interpreted by reference to the original longer item. There are three kinds of substitution. They are nominal, verbal, and clausal. So nominal substitution is when one or one's pronouns in pronominal use substitute a singular or plural countable noun, and the substitution of the whole noun phrase by the same. So this Coke is flat, get me a fresh one. One substitutes the Coke. This bulb is broken, give me a new one. So one here substitutes the bulb. So give me a pint of Guinness and packet of Crispers. I will have the same. The same refers to or substitutes a pint of Guinness and packet of Crispers. Two clauses. For that reason, we have used here the same. Verbal substitution. Substitution of a verb is carried out by means of the various form of do, functioning as proverbs, substituting for some lexical verb mentioned previously. For example, did you manage to finish that work? I didn't, but Martin did. So did here substitutes the verb manage. Or does anyone live in Grosseto? I need a lift. I do. So do here substitutes need. Clausal substitution replaces a whole clause and not just as a verb or noun. It's carried out by means of so to replace an affirmative clause and not to replace a negative one. So is there a strike on Saturday? They say so. So here substitutes is there a strike on Saturday? Or are you going to Grosseto? If so here substitutes if you are going to Grosseto, we could travel together. If you are not going to Grosseto, I will take the bus. Here not substitutes if you are not going to Grosseto. Ellipsis is similar to substitution, but the item concerned is replaced by nothing. There is an obvious structural gap which can only be revealed by previous sentence. Nominal ellipsis involves the omission of a head, noun, or noun phrase. 10 students passed and another 10 failed. Here another substitutes students. Which jeans are you going to wear? These are the nicest. These substitutes jeans. So verbal ellipsis involves the omission of a lexical verb, form a phrase and possibly an auxiliary or two, only recoverable from reference to a previous sentence. Is it going to rain today? It may not. Have you been crying? No, laughing. Clausal ellipsis is concerned with the omission of large part of clauses, whole phrases, and more. Who has taken my car? Pays. So we are talking about substitution, yes, ellipsis, clausal ellipsis, and conjunction. Conjunction refers to specific grammatical devices which link sentences to each other. Additive conjunctions add on information. Adversative conjunctions draw a contrast. Causal conjunctions make a causal link, and temporal conjunctions make a time link between two sentences. Conjunction additive and in addition, adversative but yet, however. Causal conjunctions, so therefore, consequently, and temporal conjunctions, they are then, after that, subsequently. So lexical cohesion, the use of the same or similar or related open class words in successive sentences. Reiteration, where the same word is repeated. Try speaking for 1 minute without repeating a word and you will see how difficult it is to avoid using reiteration. You can avoid it by using synonyms, words of a similar meaning, and superordinates, words of a higher order of the classification, and general words, superordinates of much higher order, which subsume the meaning by indicating a class of objects, entities, and people. So general words, a range of lexical words which need their context to be fully understood, which describes a certain class of objects. What shall I do? All this stuff. Stuff is a general word. There are a number of these words. They are basically superordinates. People, man, woman, child, boy, to refer to humans. To refer to non-human elements, we can find creature, inanimate concrete things, object, and inanimate concrete mass, stuff. Inanimate abstract nouns have a number of possible general words like business, matter, affair. Referring to actions, you can use words like move, action, and for places, place. Anaphoric nouns, they are a whole range of cohesion-producing nouns which talk about the discourse itself and can be used as proform standing for other more complete and explicit units, such as admission, accusation, answer. The proposal involves the outing, including hot pools in Saturnia and the meal at the restaurant. Collocation, either, words which habitually go together. We don't say big drinker or deep drinker. We should say heavy drinker. We say ask question and perform an operation, or from the same lexical field or set of fields. For example, an article about a road accident might have one set of words which are collocated on the topic of injury, another set about roads with the conditions, and another to do with the highway code. Coherence is concerned with logical links, which mean that the text makes sense as whole. It's concerned to a great extent with our knowledge of the world, which comes from our previous experience and learning. Text therefore can seem incoherent to people who have very different backgrounds from the person writing. Schemata, we can talk of having certain expectations. Sometimes we have talk about schemata, frames, scenarios to refer to these expectations. They often help us to predict the context, and background knowledge plays an important part in understanding text. Cohesion consists of linguistic elements in the text which are related to each other in the same way and weave the text into a whole. So it was our last slide. So I suggest that you will understand all the information that was given on the discourse analysis. Goodbye.